Is this thing on? Today is a book review in the motivation series. The first of three. Start with Why by Simon Sinek is the book. What I found most interesting about this book, so it's eventually morphed into a TED Talk. Or I think it started as a TED Talk and turned into a book. Sinek worked in tech and then sort of became sort of a business motivational speaker. He's done other things like sort of in the realm of psychology, although he hasn't had too much formal training in psychology. But he does talk about various psychological aspects. He sort of does reports from studies, but overall, Sinek it has more experience in business. Start with Why was published in 2010, and sort of the book sort of it has a lot of sort of technological references to sort of tech that might not be as commonly used today as the smartphones replaced many of them. But overall, it sort of it's a fun sort of exploration of what life was like in the early 2000s. It reminds you of some of the things going on there, but also it talks about good business models that have stood the test of time, mostly for the last 30 plus years, 40 plus years, and one thing that you might find is that it's very it views Apple in a positive light, and the Apple Corporation, the manufacturers of the iPhone and other various computing products. But he uses it sort of to distinguish them as sort of they're not necessarily a fundamentally a technology company, but sort of a revolution within the technology field. I don't know if it's sort of viewed the same way anymore. Sometimes success, as he puts in the book, morphs the visions of organizations. So it's meant to inspire and for motivation, but it's very sort of business focused. And one thing is that businesses change over time. An element of that is sort of from the Why Nations Fail book. Creative destruction. Eventually, new markets are formed, addressing various pain points within the markets. So, I don't usually delve too much into the business world too much. Not that I'm against business, not that I'm against markets. It's just personally, I've found more motivations for my own behavior outside of that necessarily of business. But the thing is that in terms of gaining sort of capital, gaining net worth, gaining assets, business is actually probably the best way to go about it. But there are things that motivate me better than capital, better than being perceived as wealthy. To me, there's sort of a higher calling to me beyond just how much money you can make, but it is nice to make good money because it helps live a more luxurious lifestyle. It's just I don't need a very luxurious lifestyle. I'm not that much of an extrovert, and I don't have a deep desire to see every country on the planet. So this book, good references to sort of early 2000s business leaders, and the premise of the book is that very few companies and very few decision paths that are made are not necessarily focused on why we are doing this. It's often sort of the general explanation is, oh, I'm wanting to serve the public if you're in politics, or I want to make money if you're in business. Well, there has to be a reason for that other than just making money. Often, if you don't have that, it doesn't necessarily lead to success, because it doesn't put a vision for a customer base to get behind, to build loyalty. So you can still continue to make money, but the thing is that you don't end up having a lot of repeat customers. Companies that do have a lot of repeat customers often are not very transactional. They're very vision focused and sort of promoting a lifestyle associated with themselves. Anyways, I'll do some quotes here, and I'll also do some quotes in the Substack. Interesting book. Probably not my favorite in terms of all the ones I've read so far this year, but still a worthwhile read. And all right, the ability to win hearts before minds is not easy. It's a delicate balance of art and science, another coincidental grammatical construction. Why is it that things are not the balance of science and art, but always art before science? Perhaps it is a subtle clue our language impaired limbic brain is sending us to see that the art of leading is about following your heart. Perhaps our brains are telling us that the why must come first. So what he's arguing here is starting with why is more of an emotional as opposed to a rational statement. And sort of most rational types sort of like to know the what and the how of things. And then the more emotional is the why. The thing is that the more emotional parts of our brain were sort of developed before the prefrontal cortex, which is sort of our executive functioning and what makes the human species one of the better communicators, because we have language through that. And our sort of more older parts of our brain doesn't have language, doesn't have that form of rational mathematical process. And so it's often more emotion based. And so it's arguing that emotions do matter more in terms of how we connect to organizations that we support. All right, the next quote. Why types are the visionaries, the ones with the overactive imaginations. They tend to be optimists who believe all the things they imagine can be accomplished. How types live more in the here and now. They are the realists and have a clearer sense of all things practical. Why types are focused on the things that most people can't see, like the future. How types are focused on things most people can see and tend to be better at building structures and processes and getting things done. One is not better than the other. They are just different ways people naturally see and experience the world. Gates is a Y type, so are the Wright brothers and Steve Jobs. But they didn't do it alone. They couldn't. They needed those who knew how. Essentially what he's arguing is, in order for a company to be a success, you need a visionary as a leader. You need a visionary who typically is more focused on why-based concepts, or emotion things, promoting an image that is not necessarily rational and it's not necessarily a sort of a function of the world. And then you need people around that leader to sort of sell the vision to those who aren't always thinking of the future, aren't always thinking of basically sort of abstract concepts, imagination. So the successful companies have both. They have someone who's very focused on the abstract, but then you have people to help turn that into reality. And the final quote for the video. Where does vision come from? And this is the power of why. Our visions are the world we imagine, the tangible results of what the world will look like if we spent every day in our pursuit of why. Leaders don't have all the great ideas. They provide support for those who want to contribute. Leaders achieve very little by themselves. They inspire people to come together for the good of the group. Leaders never start with what needs to be done. Leaders start with why we need to do things. Leaders inspire action. So the leaders, at least sort of in Simon Sinek's vision, I think the military might disagree to some degree here, and that is the leaders are sort of bearing forward the flag, and they're also sort of setting their vision of what people can do, what people ought to do, what people should do. And in order to be a successful team, but not necessarily any form of visionary success. It could be just setting a goal and accomplishing that goal. The thing is that my military training conflicts a little bit because within sort of how the military operates, a good leader can also follow. A good leader has the ability to at least perform, probably not to the same level of skill as those who he might give the orders to, but he can still do it, or she can still do it, because we're definitely not sort of a gendered aspect of leadership. So the idea that sort of leaders must always be the forebearer, must always be the visionary. Sometimes the best thing for a leader to do is take a step back and then allow others to give their inputs and put forth their ideas. And I don't know if Sinek's book at least sort of agrees fully with that. Anyways, these are just my thoughts. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. I think this is a worthwhile read. Again, not my favorite I've read, but still a fun read for the Motivation series. And thank you so much for your time. I will see you in the next one.